welcome our speaker, Karen C. from Morris Plains. And Karen is here to share on the 8th tradition.
So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me today to be part of this. I've been coming to the workshop since it was first posted out because I'm very interested in the traditions as a three legacy side of my AA life, both in personally and bringing it into my group. And how do I work it and what don't I know, because there is so much I don't know. So I've been coming. I did miss Jimmy's talk last week. I had something coming up. So, but I didn't have a chance to listen to it because I couldn't find it posted on your website. Andy said it'd be there, but I didn't see it. But I want to start telling you what I have found about this tradition. I have found that this, like all of the traditions, is about finding the hope that Bill and Bob found in sobriety and in the directions of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's all about the hope. And it's all about the unity, as always, and pointing us right back there about the unity. But it brings us into a discussion about money, and that's a topic with alcoholics that is a tough one to overcome. I mean, I came to AA. My sobriety date is September 6, 1989. My home group is Journey to Freedom in Livingston, New Jersey, and we meet on Wednesday nights for a big book study group. I have a sponsor. She has a sponsor, and I sponsor women, and I apologize. I didn't qualify myself. We started at the meeting. So before I read what the tradition is, I just needed to say that as an alcoholic coming in, I didn't trust any of you. And if I knew that there was a fee involved, I probably would have left. I probably would have left. It takes a long time for an alcoholic from the kind of person I was to trust anything or anybody. And the spirit of Tradition 9 permeated the meetings that I was privileged to attend when I first got here. So the short form of the tradition reads, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but as service centers may employ special workers. When I was new, I was like, okay, whatever. The long form, however, delves into and explains that a little bit, like what did they mean by that? So the long form says Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional. We define professionalism as the occupation of counseling alcoholics for free or hire, but we may employ alcoholics who are going to perform those services for which may otherwise have to engage non-alcoholics. Such special services may well compensate. But I got to tell you, I was still confused. I found those words really confusing. So in reading Tradition 8 and the 12 and 12, Bill makes a statement that I found really intriguing. He says that a plain line of cleavage should be made between professionalism and non-professionalism. So I sat with that word and said, what the heck is he talking about? I think of cleavage and I think of one thing, and you probably know what I'm thinking of, right? But what did he really mean? And what he really meant in the books that I was reading and the history that I went into, because the directions here were to tell a little bit of the history, your current understanding of the tradition, and how do you bring it into your own life. So what I understood it to be is a split, a defined, clear split between what is professional and what is not professional. So non-professionalism, I think I prefer to use the word amateur. And when I use the word amateur and I looked it up in the dictionary, it defines us. You know what it says? It says that an amateur is one who does something out of love. And that's what we do. We bring what we know for free and for fun. We don't charge anything. There's no fees. It's like there's nothing to chase after. I mean, if we go look in the big book on page 18, it kind of defines, there's no fees to make, there's no responsibilities, there's no payoffs, there's none of that. It's just this. How you doing? Can I help you today? And I have just had the most extraordinary few days, and I want to share a little bit about that, because this 12-step work should always be non-professional for us. It's not related to money, expectations, consequences, any of that, which is the life I had coming in here. It was so different. So the spirit of the tradition I felt when I got here in my very first meeting, the spirit of Tradition 8 was alive and well in the meetings that I attended. So by employing special workers, so we're lazy. I mean, face it, we don't want to sweep a floor. So if you have a clubhouse or you've got something like that going on, there might be funds for that clubhouse to pay for somebody to do that. Well, that's fine. That's not doing AA work. That's not what we're here. 12-step work does not have anything to do with that. So what I want to tell you about is that I volunteered last year to be on registration for the International Women's Conference that's going on right now. And so it turned out that it was going to be a virtual platform because of the pandemic. So they said, well, do you still want to help? And I said, absolutely, I'll be happy to help. Not knowing, I thought I was going to be in Charlotte at a convention, but of course, alas, we're here. Anyway, so I begin these weekly meetings, and it was turning into every other day, and they call a meeting, come on, and they're trying to explain how they're transforming a convention where the expectation is 2,000 to 4,000 women into whatever it was going to be, into a virtual platform. So I'm like confused as all heck. But I'm going with it for fun and for free. I make a commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm going to show up. So I'm doing this commitment, and it opens up on Thursday, and it's all on a virtual platform, and it's absolutely outstanding. And the women are lined up in a waiting room to come on in. Some are pre-registered, and some was on-site registration, and I'm doing on-site registration. So you have to fill out this form, and they're coming in, and they're excited. And I'm talking to them like, where are you from? Nebraska, Italy, France, Canada, California, Texas. And I'm talking to them. How long are you sober? Because you got to fill out a form. What's your sobriety date? Where do you go to meetings? How come? Where'd you hear about this? So I got the absolute privilege of one-on-one talking to these people and being able to say, well, no, this is how you do it. This is the, program, and come on back if you don't understand it. And back and forth. And last night was probably the topper. They were closing the registration for the big meeting to start. And this woman comes in at the very end. And this is tradition 8. Totally. She comes in, and I'm filling out the form for her, and where are you from? And I looked at her because the question is, what's your sobriety date? Because it is a conference for women in AA. And she looks right at me, and the tears start down her cheeks because it's one-on-one. We're in a one-on-one breakout room. And she said, I am drunk. And I looked at her and I said, well, you're in the right place. And I said, you know what? She said, I just can't stop. And because I'm armed with the facts about myself, I had her on the phone for about 40 minutes. And we chatted, and then I gave her my cell phone. She called me this morning. But I was able to sit and talk with her because of this tradition. No dues to fee. There's no expectation. I'm not a professional anything. I'm an amateur, recovered woman in Alcoholics Anonymous that can share for fun and for free. I remember being directed by my sponsor at the time, Michael, and I was asked to speak at a conference. And I'm telling her about this, and she said, well, make sure that they're paying for your expenses to get there. And they weren't. So she said, well, that's not right, you see, because here's what happens. If we have to pay for speakers, if speakers have to pay their own expenses to come in, then only the rich can do that. Then those that couldn't afford it would not be able to share experience, strength, and hope. And you would be locking the door and defining it by, once again, money. If there's any qualifier for a speaker to come in and talk, and I can't come and talk because of money. I was on our convention. I was on our convention, and the topic had come up, and I said, you know what? I just have a suggestion. If we invite a speaker to come speak, we should at least ask, do you need money for gas? To make sure that they're speaking for fun and for free. And they're not freaking out that they can't get home or they can't stay once they get there. So this is a very powerful tradition, and who the heck knew, right? It's confusing too. There's a little bit of confusion because I think the directions and how it's relayed and how we discuss it doesn't talk about these issues, right? So it says it should always be non-professional, so amateur, right? Our service centers may employ special workers. What's a service center? When I'm new, I don't understand that. I don't understand service center. So we begin to ask questions, or we don't ask at all, which is more my style. For the first 3 years of my recovery, I didn't ask. I just assumed that the people in my group knew. And the people in my group did not know because there were tradition violations all over the place. And that's why the group was somewhat sketchy. You know what I'm saying, though? Like, I didn't know that that was the reason why I was uncomfortable, was because they didn't follow the traditions in that group. And I have since become parts of groups that follow it really well. And if I'm uncomfortable in a meeting, I can guarantee you, if I sit there long enough, there's a tradition that's not being followed. And maybe it's because they didn't know, because purely, honestly, most of the time it's because they don't know. It isn't the intent. It isn't the intent. It's like everything else, it starts out good. It's like, it's kind of like my 4-step and my relationships. They started out really, really good, and then they blew up. So we got to go do this amends thing. It's kind of like that. Same thing. The group is kind of like, it's a combination of us. So we start out really, really good with really good intention. But if we're not following some kind of guidelines along the way and reaching back up to people who might know, which we think they do, the elders in our group might know, or maybe the elders stopped coming, which seems to also be something that happens. We cannot ensure for that newcomer a place where they can reach out for help and receive it free of charge. We can't ensure that if we're not following this tradition. And I'm not talking to the letter, but I'm talking by demonstration, right? So many who share their experience, strength, and hope with the newcomer, they do so, and then they help. We say this happens because it reinforces our own sobriety. I can tell you the experience I had last night with that woman. I couldn't sleep. I was so excited that she came anyway. And she dialed in and she waited in the waiting room, and she waited till she could talk to somebody. And I'm so glad she landed in my room. A little while earlier, there was another one, and I was going through the list, and I'm asking her sobriety date, and she's looking right at me. And I said, "You don't want to answer that, do you?" And she said, "No, I've got 2 days." And I said, "Well, oh my God, you're being honest. God works with honesty." And she starts laughing. I'm armed with the facts about myself, and it's for fun and for free. And we're here out of love, and that's the only reason I'm here. That's the only reason. I don't have a hidden agenda. Now, that hidden agenda is addressed in that checklist that, they ask us to go over when we're doing a traditions checklist. If you happen to do one in your home group, or they will allow you to do it. I know I had to fight in our home group to let us that happen. I said, "Come on, I want to do this." And they're like, "Yeah, right." "No, I want to do this." "Yeah, right." Okay. And the reason for this is, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, I try to carry this message to others, right? And practice these principles. And this is a principle in all my affairs. And that means everywhere. That means not only my home group, that means my relationship, that means my network, that means wherever I am, I'm practicing this. So in order to keep it, I need to give it away. And the key word for me is give. How am I giving it away? So if we AAs are doing the things we do out of love, right? Love for our fellow alcoholics, we need professionals to make sure, like we have a Jeff, plain and simple. I'm looking right at you. We have a Jeff who makes sure that we got our literature and we got all that stuff that I don't like doing. And we got cabinets and we got the meetings, and they're there to tell us about it. And if I'm confused, I can call Jeff, or I can call any number of people and say, "What do I do here? I had this situation come up. I don't know what to do," because I'm not at that service level. I dabble in it. I've had a few positions in it, and I just go back to the front line. I love working with drunks. I do. I absolutely love working with drunks. But I'll tell you, I know myself well enough to know, and I have accountability with sponsorship that I have, that if I'm the least bit cocky, I get called out on it. If I think I know, and I'm not accountable back to my sponsorship, then I am called out on it. I'm always being asked, "So what are you doing so-and-so? How's that going?" And I am reporting up, basically, and keeping myself in line. So I got a little confused with this tradition and the deal with, because I had a sponsee and I didn't know how to solve it. So I called our district rep, and I talked through the situation. It had to do with counselors, AA counselors sponsoring AAs. And it was confusing, like the line that gets crossed and the gray area that might be sitting there, right? So that's that cleavage line. that Bill talked about in the 12 and 12. The plain line of cleavage could be seen between professional and non-professional. When we agreed that the 12 step couldn't be sold for money had been a very wise move, and it really is. So she helped me go through the literature to be able to come up with these points. And this has to do with the recovery coaches and that whole world, because this really, for me, cleared it up so that I could go back to the sponsee who was going to ILP, getting directions from a counselor there that she felt was in conflict to her recovery. It was a really good question, and I didn't have the answer, so I had to go find the answer. So if you know me well enough to know if I don't know it, I'm not going to make it up. I won't make it up. So we don't pay, Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't pay or receive money for face-to-face treatment, right? We don't. That's not our deal. If we come to you, if Rhea calls me or Danielle calls me or anyone says, hey, we sit and we just chat about our experience, strength, and hope with each other. If I see a need, I'll refer you out, but we don't get paid. There's no payment due here. So groups and sponsors do not charge newcomers, hoping that will get them sober. And we don't charge. So questions came up. Do you bribe them? Do you, what do you do? Is that really for free and for all? Are you honoring their perspective? Are you allowing them to have their point of view? These are really good questions as we walked through this. Paid AA service members, on the other hand, and GSO and local intergroups do not do face-to-face work. So like if you call Night Watch, and I'm a real huge proponent of Night Watch, you're not going to get face-to-face responses. They're going to send you to a Night Watch member or somebody who's on their 12-step list to talk to or to meet with the next day or maybe at that moment, but they're not going to do it. That's not face-to-face. So somebody behind the scenes at our intergroup office is being paid to sit and man those phones. That's okay. That's what Seventh Tradition is for. We're setting aside the money to pay for those services so that you and me can do 12-step work like I did last night. So that we are available at any time, anywhere, when someone reaches out for help. We're the hand that's right there for fun and for free. That we're not expecting you to give us money. We're not expecting you to pay a bill. And that is like the coolest thing ever, because if it was like me, when I came in, I didn't trust that. I thought there was something around the corner. It took me a little while of being here to realize you were absolutely serious about that statement. And by the way, if you have $1 care, please put it in the basket. If you can support us, because this is what we do with the basket. I had a sponsor who explained that to me. Are we explaining that to the people we sponsor, like what that dollar really does, other than the blah, 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 blah that comes in the beginning of the meeting that half the people don't listen to? So it really comes down to us talking to them, right? So then the third point that I got out of all of this was that AA counselors doing face-to-face treatment of drunks are not paid by AA. So I made that clear with this sponsee. Look at AA doesn't pay them. They're doing their deal under the rules they've got going on in that treatment center, and that's perfectly okay. It's when the two collide and overstep that we might have a question, but there was no overstepping in this particular situation. So that's an AA, and clear. I said to her, listen, AA doesn't get any money from treatment centers, from hospitals, because we are not allied with any of that. And it says that in our preamble. And I'll go back and I read the preamble. I said, this is who we are. We are not allied with a hospital, with a treatment center. They don't give us any money for anything. And we don't expect any money for anything. When you make a donation, and I know Jimmy went through this last week, when you make a donation to Alcoholics Anonymous, it's from the membership. And it's limited, and there's rules and all that stuff around it. And I know he went into details about that. Jeff, I'm sorry, I don't know all the rules around it, but I just know there are some. But individual members who are also alcoholic counselors, don't bring that into the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Several times I have sponsored members of my group that are, psychiatrists, and they'll come in and they'll put the word doctor on their name, and I'll take that off. You're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. We come in here with no title. You're not a doctor. You're not different than me. You're not different than the person's walking in the door. So we don't identify ourselves by our occupations. We identify ourselves that my name is Karen and I'm an alcoholic, just like you. And that one statement allows that new person who's come into our meeting room to feel at ease, to say, maybe I do belong here. Maybe these people are just like me. Because I think of the questions and the hesitations I had, and believe me, I had many. I would not be able to have engaged if I thought that was one of authority. You might find this hard to believe, but I didn't do well with authority. I still don't do well with authority. You know, it is one of those areas of my life that I constantly am working on, work in progress. I'm just like a regular AA member. So if there was any authority having to do with our meetings, if there was any qualification like that, we would not be as effective as we are today. We would not be able to operate in this program of love as an amateur can only do it. We would not be able to speak the language of the heart. We would not be able to offer time like we offer time. Because, you know, I'm a firm believer that the God of my understanding doesn't have a clock, doesn't have a calendar, that is just show up the best you can in the way you can right here, right now. And if that conversation takes more than, I'm sorry, you only have 20 minutes like a therapist does. Oh, let's say 55 minutes than a therapist does. We don't care. We'll sit as long as you need it. Because we know we have been where you are. To be paid for that, on the flip side, I think about that because we cross the line sometimes. It gets crossed. You know, and I watch that get crossed. Like most of the time, we don't even know what each other do for a living. Right? We don't know. You know, so sometimes I know what people do because, you know, they'll tell me or we'll end up, oh, yeah, well, I found out that we're having that big snowstorm. I put it on SOS. I needed somebody to be a plower in my driveway. And I found out somebody works for a company that they could come plow me. But otherwise, I wouldn't know because our occupation is not our main concern, as opposed to how we got here, where our occupation was everything. What we did was how I defined myself, who I was. Well, I know I'm not alone in that. So anyone who puts in a 40-hour work week to help us so we can do 12-step work ought to be paid because they're facilitating the opportunity for you and me to show up at that meeting and sit with a big book to share. And I know we'll be back to our face-to-face meetings. Like I the host for our Zoom meeting, our group pays for that host fee so that it gives us an opportunity to be of service. You know, our meeting is open. I love open meetings for that reason. Anybody can come who say they want to be here. So the running of Alcoholics Anonymous, the people that run the hunt behind the scenes, the people that are mopping the floors, all that kind of stuff, they need to be paid. You know, for us to object to that, I find that really funny. You know, many of you know that I'm really involved in running retreats and facilitating workshops and all that kind of stuff. And you've got to rent the space. You have to organize the food. You have to make sure there's coffee. You have to pay for cups. You got to get sugar on the table. You got garbage bags. All those things cost money. And somebody will say to me, I thought AA was for free. Why do I have to pay $50 for the workshop? And I said, see those lights? We have to pay the bill. Or the coffee you're drinking, not for free. So it's not sponsored by Alcoholics Anonymous. It's sponsored by our retreat group, but we still have to pay for the space. The meeting room we're meeting in, and you might not know this, but the church charges rent. And we put money in that basket, and we as a group have decided how we're going to manage that amount of money. And I know that it's kind of going back on stuff, Tradition 7 a little bit. But that stuff, those are conversations to have with somebody who's questioning that. Because I don't think they understand the spirit of this tradition. It's all meant so that I can be available to do exactly that and that 12-step work. So if they engage it, if somebody wants to engage in an AA counselor, somebody who is also from the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they do so outside the meeting, great. That's great. But not in the meetings, not as a group. We come here as who we are, members of a program of recovery, supported by those pillars of the tradition. And it just keeps us so safe and protected. It's unbelievable. So tradition 7 says that the 12-step groups are self-supporting through their own contributions, and that those contributions are used to employ special workers. Makes sense? And so this girl I was working with said, yeah, okay, I get it. But if you don't explain that as a sponsor one-on-one or in a small group or whatever you're doing, your group will never understand that. And there's a resentment that because, well, we got $465 in our treasury. Why don't we just give it to the church? And I say, because it's against the traditions. We can't just give it. That's 7th tradition money collected specifically for our group. And if there's money left over beyond what we'll call our prudent reserve, which, by the way, do you have one personally? They'll say no. Beyond your prudent reserve, it needs to be donated to the very places that support us so that we can be here, so the lights are on for you to come down those steps of Journey to Freedom and walk in our meeting. So there's literature on the table and there's pamphlets made. By the way, have you ever read a pamphlet? Well, I have a sponsor that made me read all of the pamphlets word by word. But anyway, so all of them are sitting there to support you. So you want to know about something? Okay, here's this pamphlet about the group. I was reading a pamphlet about the traditions, which I never really read before. Oh, don't tell her that, but I hadn't really read it. I skimmed it, Cliff Notes version, so I could report back on it, but I didn't read the whole thing. This time I read the whole thing, and I found some very interesting comments that supported how I felt, but I could articulate to you what I read, and that's exactly what I'm reading. Many people, me included, do not trust authority. It's true of any of us, right, who want to get sober. So going to a professional is authority. I pay them, so I think I own them, or because I pay you, I think you owe me, or something like that. We set up some kind of give and take. Right? That's a little bit different. So 12-step groups are different. No authority. There's no authority. So the member can't rebel against you. They can just say, this is not for me. So we've taken away a layer that might be the very layer of that person being able for us to help him put his hand in God's hand. So he'll get sober for good and for all. Took away just another layer, right? So hiring special people is really important. Working through that is really important. Explaining that is really important. Sometimes our central office, like we have a very active area, and there's not a lot of areas like Area 44, I might say, and 24 down by you guys. They get involved in more work than just volunteer services to support the groups. They do a whole lot of stuff. And I know that they have to hire certain people like GSO. You just go there, they're hiring people to help us. But it's to help us. It's to help us with that upside down triangle, to keep that message alive, right? Throughout the world, they print, they communicate, they have 800 numbers. None of that's free. They turn on lights, they mail out, they do all those things. None of those items are free. So I think the non-professional or amateur principle in the checklist that, we're asked to review, is number 4. I think that one got me the most, in that AA has no subject matter experts. It's funny because in my work, the work I'm doing right now, I'm doing a series of trainings, right? And I'm always bringing in that subject matter experts. Well, here, we have no subject matter experts. We have experience, strength, and hope. And experience replaces that word subject. And if there's somebody who says to me about something like, I don't know anything about, or they came to me because they're a drug addict, I don't have that experience. So I said, I know somebody who does, though, who has your experience. Because there are stories in the back of our big book. I've read them. I really like reading them, but I can direct somebody to a story in the book. I said, you know what? There's a story that's just like this. Let's read it together. And that's the kind of subject matter expert that appears in our working with others in this amateur profession of love, right? So we remain forever non-professional. So the number 4 that I wanted to talk about, because sometimes I hear this, right? And believe me, I try really hard to be accountable when my arrogance starts talking. I really do. So it's number 4 is like, do I sound, this is my interpretation of this. Do I try to sound in AA like an expert on alcoholism or on recovery? Do I try to sound like an expert, or do I bring you my experience, strength, and hope? It's all in the delivery. And I have a sponsor who is continually saying to me to reword that, who's always going back on your experience. Do I have an expert in recovery? No, I'm not an expert in recovery. I have experience, strength, and hope with my experience. I can share that with you. It's just my experience, though. On medicine, I don't have an MD after my name. I was reminded that several times. So therefore, if it has anything to do with medication, I can't tell you anything about that. Maybe you should talk to your doctor, though, and tell him about the side effects that you're feeling, and you want to quit taking the drugs or you want to take more. I don't know. I don't have any experience there. How am I guiding that question? On social problems, somebody came on the phone and was saying something that was really derogatory. And I said, you know what? We have a prayer that, when I'm faced with something like that, and I think I have an opinion, and it's called the set aside prayer. And it goes something like this. Dear God, help Karen me set aside everything I absolutely think I know about this situation and guide me to the truth. And that's the program that I'm taught here. So if I'm presented with an opinion of one thing or another, like this meeting is to this or this meeting is to that, and it's become very judgy, I'll fall back on exactly what I've learned. Say, if I'm judging a situation for what I see, it's normally my self will run riot appearing again, and I'm going to have an opinion that might harm my group. And that is not for the good of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not for the good of my family. It's not for the good of my network. So I need to set aside everything I think I know for a new experience with my God. So I can stay open-minded. So I can stay willing. So I can practice this whole spirit of being available for the next person that walks into my life or down those steps. So I'm present right here, right now, being able to help you for exactly what's going on for you. Nothing else. Nothing smaller, nothing bigger, just like that. So the other things I said, okay, on AA itself, a lot of us have a lot of opinions about meetings, and they can eke through when you're working with another. You might have somebody who comes to you and they just absolutely love the meeting you can't stand. So if I can't stand something, I'll go to that when I can't stand something. And it might not be my flavor of the week, but it's her flavor of the week. And I'll sit and I'll watch her be engaged in her flavor of the week. And I'll ask the questions. I'll ask, so what did you learn here? What popped out at you? Because we can bring it back into the 12 steps. We can bring it back into the work that we understand. We can bring it back in how I hear you saying that. And maybe that's where she needs to be. I know when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm a real big book person today. I was not a real big book person then. I pretended I was. I did because my sponsor did and because that's where she wanted me to go. But quite truthfully, I didn't get it. It was a whole lot of language and a whole lot of words, and I didn't have the experience. I gained the experience, though, walking through it over and over and over. And today, I tell you, I live in pages 62 to 68. But then I didn't know that. So I identified with the fellowship meetings. But along with those fellowship meetings, I had a sponsor who directed me to the literature. She directed me. She helped me the bridge to the literature. So I was also hearing the message. The message. Our message is from Alcoholics Anonymous at Hall. And we have one solution. And that's how did she get my hand in the hand of God? And my group has a message as well. So it was really important that I paid attention to what they liked. Imagine that, to take that position with a newcomer. I didn't for a long time until, stuff happened and you had to reset and you had to go back. And usually you only reset when it's a painful experience, you know how we are. But I want to stay sober for good and for all. So I'll reset. I'll look at it. I'll look at where I felt wronged, and we got a direction for that and an inventory for that for somebody on my end working with somebody else to get through for me how I need to reset on that. So on psychology, same thing, right? It tells us we're going to face those things. But if we stay in the principles of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, translated through the demonstration, we're very effective for a newcomer. They don't feel judged because you found it in a book. You're not saying what you think, right? Or heaven help me on humility. So somebody will come and you'll know they're coming from an angle of a lot of pain. They can't, oftentimes I put myself in that position. I couldn't hear you for a long time until I could hear you. I have a friend that says that all the time. He said, it works until it doesn't. And I look at the people I work with so I can be present on that kind of sponsorship doing the same thing. I must be available for you. I must be available. Do I complain about any of the traditions? I mean, this checklist took me through a whole lot of understanding. In my own A life, I can share with you a point on that checklist that is said, I've had experiences, right, to make the difference between an effective working with others and not. When I become in charge, not effective. When we are in charge, effective. Very different, right? So have I paid enough attention to the 12 steps and 12 traditions in order to state clearly what I think about tradition 8? And I believe so, but there's always room for improvement. So I want to talk a little bit, 15 minutes, I think. I want to talk a little bit about traditions and relationships. You all probably know that Polly's my grant sponsor. And as you may or may not know that, but she is. And as my grant sponsor, she and her husband have done traditions and relationships for years. And when you're sponsored by her, you do traditions and relationships with them because that's the way it works in our legacy. So she sat with me and we talked about this because I am guilty of blowing up every relationship I was ever in. I didn't know how to do this well. I really didn't. I didn't know how to have good relationships. I didn't know how to bring the truth to a relationship. And all the steps and the traditions up to this point have reinforced my life in a way that I now can bring truth to a relationship. I can bring friendliness to a relationship. I can bring what Bill and Bob hoped we would do, and that is I can bring hope to any relationship. That if I can do it, you can do it. I was a freaking train wreck. And when I think back, because I was been thinking about this since Anthony called and asked me to do this assignment, I've been thinking about how this has transformed my relationships as well as my commitment to my group and my commitment to my group Journey to Freedom and my commitment to Area 44 and my commitment to AA as a whole. Has it affected it? And I would say absolutely. If I believe in what they're saying to me, that my relationship in this tradition is non-professional or amateur, and as an amateur, I do all things out of love, have I approached this out of love? Do I have a reservation? If I have a reservation in any way, we go and we look at that. So is it a giving relationship? Am I here because I want to be here, just because I want to be here? And the answer today is yes. Am I in my relationships today because I want to be there? And the answer is yes. If there's relationships that I don't like, and believe me, they come, God has helped me set aside everything I think I know about that relationship for a new experience with it. And in that perception, I've been able to take the spirit of this into what it asks me to do. And that's to work one-on-one, face-to-face as just a recovered person. So it doesn't matter if I like the room or not, or the person or not. It doesn't matter. I'm just asked to do one thing, and that was show up for God. Freely receive, freely give. So my individual contribution to a relationship needs to be free and from my heart. So, if you're my friend and I'm thinking about you, I'll call you. This is in my personal life. If you're my friend and I'm thinking about you, I might send you a card or I get in touch with you and I try to remember things that are important to you. It used to be I needed you to be important for me. I needed you to show up for me. I needed you to recognize me. That's all switched around. Now I could just be there because I can. And I'm cool with that. We just passed Valentine's Day, and that used to be just a really horse show for me. And Polly and I worked through that. And she said, well, turn it around. Just start talking to people that you care about and that you care and love about, and let them know. And I started doing that, and now I just look forward to that day. Same thing for my birthday. I do the same thing on my birthday. I call people and have a party for myself with you to celebrate me. Complete turnaround. So this tradition in my personal life has given it a whole new ability. Now people feel comfortable where they didn't used to feel comfortable. Because I'm not a professional anything, right? I have a career. I have a job that pays me an income so I can do this. I always say, it's God's money anyway. I really just don't have much to do with that income that I got. And I have a nice income, and it keeps changing and swaying around. But you know what? God's in all charge of that. And I really believe that. So when it comes to chores and things like when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, my husband had left me. He'd gone, he split. And I had 3 little kids at the time. I still have 3 kids. They were little then. They were 11, 8, and 4. And there were chores to be done. Now, when he lived in the house, to get back at me, it would be a chore list, and then he would let them off the hook, and he would do it, and then tell, it was just a mess. So we didn't have much accountability going on back and forth. Believe me, I see what I could have done different, and I could have done a whole lot of things different, but that's kind of like how it landed when he left. So we started to make a chore list, and my kids rebelled at the very beginning. And so I had to work through that. And my first sponsor in the world gave me one guiding star. And she said, those children did not ask to be born. And I was like, oh, so we need to show them what to do. Like I needed to be shown in Alcoholics Anonymous how to not drink a day at a time. So I could be there for the next person who walked in to show them what I did for fun. And so I didn't ever pick up a drink again. Same kind of thing. So when it comes to chores, we started to share. We started to make, all kinds of different things, all kinds of little things. I'm kind of creative in the way I'll put a poster sticky board up and say, just pick one, just do one a day. And they started to do a chore a day. And pretty soon my house was in order because it became a we, not a me being bossy and critical. It was us getting the chores done. If you're hungry, okay, well, make something. If you don't like the food, all right, but that's what we're having for dinner. If you want something else, go ahead and cook it. And it was all of a sudden my son decided he had to be the man of the house. He was 8. And I said, no, honey, you don't have to do that. We're going to all do this together. And he assigned himself a job of being the man of the house. Taking the garbage out, for instance, because she thought I shouldn't lift it. And I'm like, you're 8 years old. We can all take the garbage out. So it became kind of funny as we try to work through these days. And my 3 kids are very accountable and responsible adults today. And I watch them doing similar things to their kids, and I can only but laugh. We're really not the boss. I used to say that I ran a dictatorship, a benevolent dictatorship. And I did. It was kind, so I thought. But they felt ordered around, and they didn't feel part of. And I had tremendous ADD. So, everything had to be in color coded and special order and all that stuff. I drove them absolutely out of their minds. But nobody really is in charge. It's a we. It became a we. And as we grew through recovery together, and I had a sponsor who was really guiding me on this, I learned how to bring that we into the jobs of the house, into the finances of the house, into being accountable in all areas of my life in the house. I began to really understand that I'm really not in charge of anything. And if I think I am, I'm in delusion, and I had to avoid taking a know-it-all attitude and allow them the latitude of speaking what they needed to say. We came up with lots of stuff, like had a timer on my table, and it went for 2 minutes, and they could say whatever they wanted to say for 2 minutes, and the timer went up. We couldn't hold it against them, but they got out what they needed to say. I'm sure I've saved them thousands and thousands of dollars in professional help because it turned around that all they needed to say was, I don't think it's fair that he goes to sleep. He gets to go to bed a half hour later than me. That kind of stuff. So straighten it out. So I'm not a certified expert in any of those fields. I was a drunk mom who put a bomb in my family. He left. It was everything I could do to just put bread on the table for several years, But through the help of Alcoholics Anonymous and the people that came in front of me, I got the benefit of one-on-one working with me. Hey, I know somebody that did the same thing, and she would tell me about, co-oping with babysitting and what she did. And all of a sudden, for fun and for free, we got a way of living that I can pass on to the next person who walks in for fun and for free. And thank God there were the big books in my room. I never thought about where they came. They just were always there. The 12 and 12s were on the tables. The pamphlets were there. If I needed one, I just asked our rep and they would make sure I got it. I never even thought about where they got it or where it's sourced from until I went to visit these places, until I went to GSO. I was amazed. And so I started doing the history, and I love the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you look through what they started with and what we have today, and it is unbelievable that the foresight was given, that this was so important, that our one-on-one working with others, our 12-step work was so important that everything supports that. The one thing, the very sole thing. So when individually I was living by those principles, it just kind of spilled over into living in the group. And then in the group, it kind of works in circle, right? So collectively, those 12 steps and 12 principles gave me the foundation to be able to work with others, right? It envelops me. It reduces the self-centeredness, reduces my self-centeredness. I didn't even know it was self-centered. Discovered that, right? So being in touch with all of these things allowed us to be free regardless, and our spirits soar. So do the traditions accurately describe my behavior at all times? No. I have inventory for that, and I have accountability with sponsorship. What needs changing? Sometimes several things needed changing. I was involved in a group several years ago that wasn't really working the traditions. There was a lot of issues. We started a new group. In fact, I went to Jimmy and I said to him, listen, this is what's going on. I need your help. He asked a ton of questions. We went through a whole lot of inventory questions on it, to arrive at it, to do what we needed to do. So, I kept saying, can I just have Design for Living North? And he said, no, you have to have your own group. I wanted to bring Design for Living North. Couldn't do that. I asked myself the same question that the group should be asking. Do we try to sound like an expert on all things? And if I don't know, we'll go find the expert. If it needs to be outside that room, great. Right? Is my security at risk? And this is something that I was in the gray area about. I sometimes would feel less than if I didn't have an answer, right? And I had to learn that that's an okay feeling. It means that I just don't know and I have to seek it. God could and would if you were sought. That means I have to continue to seek it. And that includes when I don't know. Do I believe that certain things belong to certain genders? Do I think guys have to do certain things and women have to do other things? Have I caused that kind of disruption in my family life or in my group? Is it all for one for all? Are we all the same? Well, sometimes no, guys are stronger than me. Most of them are taller. So I'm tall, but I'm not that tall. So can you help me with the ladder? Is a lot easier to ask them than for me doing it. So no, I don't think so. But I'll ask them, is that uncomfortable for you? And they'll say yes or no. Do I make it a point to find out your opinion and view on things? I try to. I won't push it though. If you don't want to tell me, okay. But usually you can tell by the way a person walks. A lot of our language and a lot of our communication in our home group and in my family life were words that weren't said. So I became very attuned to what wasn't being said. And accordingly, and this got me in a lot of trouble, I would assume something instead of ask something. Did my own feelings of self-worth interfere with the effectiveness of that family or that friendship or that home group? Was I doing anything like that? So I started to really study and ask those questions as Polly was drilling me on the traditions and relationships. Kind of a role model. Didn't have role models. You wouldn't want my role models around you, I'll tell you that much. I didn't really have any role models, but I found them here. The people came as soon as I started to seek it. I started to find the people, and it would be somebody like Jeff, or somebody who shows up in my life. John in the history. There's a bunch of real experience in our area that assists us at our group level. And interestingly enough, they have got that experience on a personal level in so many ways. So, we had to reach out for them. And this was the most important question that I continue to ask as I work with others. Do I give it for fun, for free, or is there a quid pro quo? Am I looking for something in return? And that, my friends, is the age-old question of my arrogance, of my selfishness, of my self-centeredness, and where am I in my program? And that 10th step and into the 11th step has helped me so much to see where I need to tweak it, where I need an inventory, where I need to take it a step further. So I no longer do what I always did, which was take hostages in my relationship to make sure you did what I needed you to do to fulfill the needs that I had. Hopefully I don't do that in my home group, so that new person coming down those stairs and walks in our meeting feels like they're at home, and we're prepared to do what we need to do one-on-one to get that person's hand in the hand of God. So I think that's all I have. I know it was 70 minutes, but there you go. That's my understanding of Tradition 8.
Thanks so much, Karen. That was really